Greetings and good morning from the Galapagos Islands, or should I say, hola y buenos dias de la isla Galapagos. Today we're continuing our amazing expedition through the Galapagos Islands, seeing more amazing creatures from around this island chain. If you have yet to check out part 1, go ahead and check it out if you want to see how this incredible adventure began. In part 1, we explored the coastal land looking at frigate birds and blue-footed boobies, as well as diving with sea turtles, marine iguanas, and lots of types of fish. We will continue to do some of that in part 2, but we will also going further inland onto the islands to look at the largest tortoises on the planet, none other than the giant Galapagos tortoise. We will also be exploring some of the local coastal lagoons to see water birds like flamingos. We are currently in the process making our way towards the next island where we will be exploring and seeing Galapagos tortoises, with the views of the islands in the distance providing for some absolutely amazing scenery. Arriving on the island, we soon began heading away from the water and heading inland, where we would later find a bunch of creatures like the tortoise. Now, you eagle-eyed viewers will probably remember that I talked about Galapagos tortoises in my very first video on this channel at the Austin Zoo. However, we're about to see them in the wild, which is a huge step up from seeing animals in zoos. It doesn't take us very long to find a clue of tortoises being around, as 2 blocks of tortoise dung are found right here next to the trail. But no tortoises yet. Gotta keep looking. Nothing yet. Keep looking. Continuing on, we soon spot a leftover tortoise shell from a dead tortoise. According to my guide Jimmy, this was probably left by a young female. Turtles and tortoises will use these shells to protect themselves against predators, and hardly any predators have jaws that are strong enough to bite right through those shells. However, on occasion, some of them can bite through. Continuing on, we soon spot a Galapagos land iguana hiding down in the bushes. There are 3 species of land iguanas found here on the Galapagos Islands. One of them is just called the land iguana, and the other 2 are the Galapagos pink land iguana and the Santa Fe land iguana. The one in front of us here is the standard Galapagos land iguana, as you can tell by its yellow skin. I was mostly expecting to see marine iguanas here in the Galapagos Islands, however there are also still quite a lot of land iguanas. Continuing on, we soon encounter our first Galapagos tortoise. By far the largest tortoises in the world, Galapagos tortoises have been known to reach record weights of over 500 pounds. Now that's as big as some of the world's largest cats. Now the one in front of me, based on the size, was probably not quite that big, probably more like 100 pounds, but man, that's still big. Resting very close to the Galapagos tortoise was yet another Galapagos land iguana. Finding creatures here in the Galapagos Islands is easy, as seeing as they're not afraid of us, as I stated in part 1, they are not hard to find. As we continue our hike across the island, it's worth noting just how dry the vegetation is. Knowing that, you may be a little bit surprised to hear this.
For the land ecosystems. No water, no rain, nothing. So even, can you believe, having all this vegetation super dry, we have no fires here.
I was curious about that.
No fires, no hurricanes, no typhoons.
Interestingly, despite the vegetation being extremely dry, there are no fires here. I think that means that there are no lightning storms that come through here, as usually when lightning strikes dried up plants, it will usually cause big wildfires which can burn up vegetation. Well, it doesn't happen here. Where they do happen, wildfires actually do benefit the environment because they help burn off any dead plants so that new ones can grow in their place. We soon encounter another Galapagos tortoise also hanging out in the shade. Galapagos tortoises, like all reptiles, are cold-blooded, which means that when it's hot like this, they have to find shade in order to stay cool. The sun was blazing hot outside today, and so I was looking forward to getting back to the ocean and perhaps getting into the water and getting a bit of a refresh from this extremely hot sun. Encountering a couple more land iguanas, we soon make our way back to the coast where I could get some refreshment before heading back to the ship. After a little bit more walking, we soon arrived back at the coast where I could finally get some refreshment and go swimming. And because I brought my waterproof socket for my phone, I managed to get some shots of me going into the water and swimming. It was such a refreshment to finally be in the ocean after that intense heat. Every once in a while, a wave would crash against us, and man, did me and my cousins and my fellow travelers have a lot of fun. As we were getting refreshed, I soon got word that there was a ray swimming around somewhere, and so I put my phone under the water to try and get some footage of it. However, since I didn't have my goggles, I couldn't really see where the camera was facing, and so I didn't really manage to get a good shot of it. Arriving back at the yacht, it's now time for dinner. For dinner tonight, I decided to go with the calamari, which came served with a side of french fries. Just as it looked, the calamari was delicious. The meal itself is great, with the calamari's crunchiness being an amazing addition along with its tastiness, and the french fries rounded out the meal quite well. This dinner I think is definitely a 9 out of 10. The calamari itself is great, and the french fries are also tasty, meaning that I don't have many complaints with this meal at all. It's pitch black outside by the time we finish up dinner, and with that, it's soon time to turn out the lights for a good night's rest. We soon wake up the next morning as our boat navigates towards its next island. The high islands protrude in the distance out from the ocean, providing for some absolutely amazing views to wake up to. We soon reach our next island, and thus it's soon time to begin our next activity. The first activity of today would again be more snorkeling, again in a coral reef. Huge schools of fish swam around in the coral reef, with the waves providing for each current, weaving the fish and the seaweed back and forth. I didn't know what types of fish these were, however, if you can identify them, comment me down below. Again, I stated this in part 1, I don't know every type of fish that live around the Galapagos Islands, so if you can identify them, then comment me. Once again, swimming with us just like last time were some sea turtles. Much like the Galapagos tortoises I experienced just a little bit ago, sea turtles use their shells for protection from major ocean predators like sharks. However, even they on occasion can make it through the shell and eat them. There were quite a lot of turtles swimming around today, and like most of the other Galapagos Island creatures, they were not afraid of us in the slightest. The waters today were rather rough and made the snorkeling a little bit tough, as the waves would oftentimes blow water into the snorkels. Unlike my last snorkeling, where there were no marine iguanas feeding on the ground, which was a little bit disappointing seeing as I was really looking forward to seeing them again. That said, there were still plenty of schools of fish, meaning that there was still quite a lot to enjoy on this snorkel. Our activity concludes and we soon arrive back at the yacht. We soon spot a sea turtle swimming around at the surface as our boat begins to navigate towards its next island. Our next island will feature some new things as we continued our expedition in the Galapagos Islands. We arrive at our next island the very next day, which ended up being rather cloudy. The water was also quite rough in this area, with waves crashing against the shore every couple seconds. The coastal waters of this island were full of quite a lot of animals. Swimming very close to the boat was a huge school of pufferfish. Pufferfish are a type of fish where some species, when they blow up, will get huge amounts of spikes that are poisonous as a way to protect them from predators. Speaking of predators, I managed to get a brief shot of a small black-tipped shark swimming right by the boat. I managed to get some better looks of sharks for later in the expedition. The guys soon get the dinghies ready, and after grabbing a quick hot dog for breakfast, it's soon time for our first activity. Our first activity for today would be looking at water birds at a small lagoon near the ocean, and after taking us to the mainland from the boat, we soon get on a bus that will take us right towards the lagoon. Waiting in the lagoon were a couple of pale pink flamingos. Flamingos are a type of bird that will wade in the water and eat a lot of seafood, mainly shrimp. This is actually the reason behind the fact that flamingos are usually pink, is because they eat a lot of pink shrimp. However, if they don't eat for a while, their feathers will actually turn white due to no pink shrimp to make them pink. We briefly saw white flamingos in our expedition in Africa, so check that video out if you want to know more about that. As well as the flamingos, there was another type of bird that appeared to be a sandpiper perhaps. Sandpipers are a type of bird that, like flamingos, will wade in the water and pick off types of small food. I don't know what types of food they eat, but if you know more about them, then comment me down below. We soon continue on with the bus tour after looking at the birds for a little bit, our bus soon continuing on across the island. We soon stop briefly alongside a lagoon, the driver briefly letting us outside. I was unable to get any footage of the creatures in the lagoon from all the way up here, and so with nothing really to see, we soon get back on the bus and continue on. After a little bit more driving, we soon come to a stop right at another beach. The guide soon allowed us to take off our shoes, and seeing as how sandy this beach was, I soon decided to take advantage of it so I could walk around barefoot in the sand and have some fun on the beach here. Once again hanging out on the beach were again some marine iguanas, and seeing as they're my favorite creature on the Galapagos Islands, I figured I'd spend some time hanging out with them. It wasn't just reptiles sunning themselves on their rocks today, predators were out on the hunt too, as a huge heron was walking around out on the hunt for fish. Like sandpipers and flamingos, herons will stand around in shallow water while waiting for food to come to them, and then they will strike quickly with their super long spear beak and grab their fish when it gets close enough. This heron in particular appeared to be on the lookout for food based on its walking pose. I was hoping to get a good shot of the heron striking at its prey, and so I waited. And waited. And waited some more. I unfortunately didn't manage to get a shot of the heron lunging for fish, as my patience soon began to wear thin, and so I eventually turned my attention towards the marine iguanas. As you probably saw if you watched part 1, marine iguanas will spend most of the daylight hours hanging out on rocks while sunning themselves so that they can stay warm. Marine iguanas have to do this because they're cold-blooded like all reptiles, which means that they can't maintain their own heat. As well as adult marine iguanas, there are a number of young marine iguanas, many of which were using these little tide pools to learn how to swim. Unfortunately, our enjoying sights of the marine iguanas soon had to come to an end as we were soon asked that we had to head back to the yacht. Arriving back at the yacht, we soon get the briefing of what's going to happen tomorrow, and the briefing soon informs us that we're going to be going to some kind of tortoise camp. You'll see what that's like later in this video once we get there. After the briefing, it's soon time for dinner. Before our main course arrives, a bowl of popcorn is delivered, which makes for a good appetizer while we wait for our main course to arrive. Our main course is soon served, and for dinner tonight I went with the chicken tenders and french fries. Just as they looked, the chicken and french fries were awesome. The french fries were crunchy and tasted really good, and the chicken itself was quite juicy and tender, making for an amazing main course for dinner tonight. As far as dinners go, this is definitely an 8.5 out of 10. My only complaint with the meal was that the chicken was a little bit too rich to completely finish. However, other than that, it was an awesome meal. Before going to bed, there were still a number of other creatures to see, as a pelican was resting right on the deck of our boat. Pelicans are a type of fish-eating seabird that will dive down like many types of seabirds do and scoop fish up in their beaks. One thing that pelicans do that many other seabirds don't have is that they have a pouch on the bottom of their beak. This helps pelicans catch fish easily like a giant fishing net. Also swimming around the boat was a small black-tipped shark. There are over 400 different species of sharks in the world, and my personal favorite out of all of them is the great white shark. It was nearly impossible for me to get good views of the sharks in this pitch blackness, which is why I'm going to have to wait to explain more till I get more better shots of them. As pelicans, sharks, and sea lions swim around the boat, it's soon time to get to bed. We wake up to a rather cloudy day the next morning, and it's soon time to begin our first activity right at the crack of dawn. Arriving on the dock, we find a couple of sea lions resting right on the dock. Now that's certainly something interesting to see. Remember, I said this in part 1, but in case you haven't watched part 1, they have sea lions in the Galapagos Islands, no seals. I'm afraid we don't have much time to hang out with sea lions, as we have to catch a bus that will give us a tour of this part of the island. Our bus soon gets rolling right as I get seated, and we soon begin our first activity of the day. Making our way, we soon spot a giant iguana statue, certainly something cool to see in a town on the Galapagos Islands. Our bus soon comes to a stop, which means it's time for our first activity of the day. Our first activity today was to head over to a Galapagos tortoise breeding center. It was a little bit of a walk to get to the breeding center, however, after some walking, we eventually arrived. Displayed right at the entrance to the breeding center was a statue of a Galapagos tortoise, which is certainly something cool to include at the entrance. Exiting the entrance building, we soon make it to the enclosures housing Galapagos tortoises. A bunch of Galapagos tortoises were hanging out towards the other side of the enclosure, eating lettuce. Galapagos tortoises are strictly herbivores, which means that they only eat plants. They'll eat stuff like cactus, leaves, and bushes, among other things. In this enclosure over here were a number of baby Galapagos tortoises. Each baby tortoise had a number painted onto its shell, which I suppose was for identification, although I wasn't entirely sure. Galapagos tortoises in the past have faced extreme decline in terms of population, decreasing from over 250,000 in the past to only about 15,000 today, which is why Galapagos tortoise breeding centers like this one are working as hard as they can to help bring back this species. The reason they declined so much is because back in the 18th and 19th centuries, people hunted Galapagos tortoises for stuff like oil and food, as well as introduced invasive species into their environment and destroyed their habitat for constructing more urban areas. These are threats that a lot of animals around the world are experiencing in the modern day. A lot of creatures are hunted for their meat or some kind of body part so that they can sell them for money, and their habitats are also destroyed for more urban areas, and invasive species are frequently introduced into their homes. A lot of the creatures that I experienced during our expedition in Africa are experiencing these problems. Animals like rhinos and elephants in Africa are oftentimes hunted for their horns and their tusks, as well as their habitat being destroyed, which is why a lot of them have been pushed to the very edge of extinction. However, thanks to conservation efforts, these creatures, along with the tortoises here in the Galapagos Islands, have made a good comeback. After visiting the tortoise breeding center, we soon began making our way over to a museum. Right at the entrance to the museum is a huge whale skeleton. It was said on the sign here that this was the skeleton of a bride whale. I don't know much about that kind of whale, however, comment me down below if you do know more about it. One thing's for sure, whales sure have a really wide mouth. This is because many types of baleen whales like this one here use their big mouths for what is called filter feeding, which is where they use their baleen as basically a sifter to let water out of their mouth while keeping the food in. Over here was a skeleton of what was perhaps a dwarf sperm whale, another whale I don't know a whole lot about. After checking out the museum, we soon make our way back towards town and the coastline, as we are soon time to board the bus up to the tortoise camp. Hanging out right next to the sidewalk were a couple of marine iguanas. I never expected to see marine iguanas this close to urban areas, so this was certainly something cool to see. Still hanging out right on top of the dock were a couple of sea lions, which made something very cool to look at while we were waiting to board the bus to the tortoise camp. Our bus soon pulls up to the dock, and it's soon time to climb aboard and head inland. The ocean soon fades away into the mist behind us as we soon make our way inland. The ride gets ever more rattly the further inland we get, as the road slowly transitions from asphalt to dirt. After a little bit of bumping and rattling, we soon reach the tortoise camp and can soon get off. Right at the entrance here is a small bar where campers can have breakfast as well as sit and lounge around. This is very similar to what I experienced at the lodge in Madikwe National Park during our expedition in Africa, so if you want to know what I mean, then check out that video. From this balcony here, we can get a great view of the open field with tortoises slowly making their way all around. With those little legs, tortoises are not very fast on land, as you probably already know. After taking a quick look at the tortoises, we soon begin making our way over to our tent. To keep the tortoises from intruding upon the campers, the tents are located a little bit above ground so that the tortoises can't climb in. The tent has two extremely comfy beds on either side, both of which look ideal for resting. Our guide Jimmy soon leads us out on a brief rainy walk to explore the campgrounds. A bunch of tortoises were hanging out in the middle of the open while it was raining, and thus they headed into their shells in order to keep safe from the rain. Located right outside our camp was a small cave. Our guide soon led us right into it to see what it was like underground. A small table was set up for tourists, as well as there being pretty much nothing but darkness except for this one empty space. Holes in the cave ceiling like this are called dolines. Dolines will allow sunlight to penetrate right into the cave, allowing the process of photosynthesis to occur, meaning that plants can thrive right inside the cave. In areas of the cave that are completely covered and have no sunlight, plants cannot thrive, as sunlight is something that plants really need. These markings and formations are signs of water having eroded away with rocks, which is how caves are made. The rain got harder and harder, and thus we soon headed back to our tents to take shelter from the rain. The rain continues to fall as we sit around in our camp with the sky completely misty gray. Unfortunately, my phone was almost out of charge at this point, and seeing as I had to charge it, I was unable to video the rest of day 1 here at the tortoise camp, and so I'm going to have to skip over to day 2. Day 2 was just as cloudy as it was on day 1, although the mist had cleared up just slightly. It wasn't long after waking up that it was soon called to breakfast, and thus I headed over to the bar to grab something to eat before heading back to the coastline. For breakfast this morning, I decided to go with buttermilk pancakes, which came served with a side of bread and pineapple. The bread and pineapple were quite good and made for an overall satisfying side dish. The pancakes were not that play. They had some kind of weird banana-like flavor, which I personally don't like with pancakes, and overall were not great. Overall, as an entree, I'd say that this is maybe a 4.5 out of 10. The pancakes were not great for a main course, but the bread and the pineapple were the saving grace. However, I definitely would have liked something a bit more than what I've got, but that's just down to personal preference. We soon get ourselves one final look at the tortoises before getting onto the bus. Soon, it's time to get back on the bus and leave the camp and head back for the coastline where we would meet up with the ship for our future activities. Our bus soon comes to a stop, and thus it's soon time for us to disembark and make our way towards the boat to begin navigation towards our next island. Before we know it, we're once again heading back out to sea shortly after arriving back at the yacht, and next island, here we come. As we make our way across the ocean, I soon once again head right to outside to enjoy the views of the ocean as we navigate. The sky grows ever more misty as we continue our navigation, with the islands in the distance eventually completely disappearing into the clouds. As we continue our navigation, it's soon time for lunch. I opted to have the spaghetti on today's lunch. The spaghetti looked good, smelled great, and was an amazing option. The spaghetti itself was really good, with the soy sauce adding a little bit of saltiness to add some even more flavor. Overall, this was just about the best meal I've had in the Galapagos Island trip so far, and I have to give it a 10 out of 10. With lunch now having wrapped up, it's soon time to get over to the dinghies for our final activity here in the Galapagos Islands. To begin, the concluding activity was a bit of snorkeling, and here we had some amazing visitors joining us in the swim today. A number of sea lions were swimming around with us, and like many of the other creatures we've seen in the Galapagos Islands, they were not shy in the slightest. Check out the way the sea lions will torpedo right through the water. Sea lions will use their tail flippers for propulsion and their pectoral flippers for steering. The sea lion can swim in record bursts of over 25 miles per hour, which is well over the speed of the average human can swim. Sea lions need these unique swimming powers as the ocean has a lot of dangerous predators such as killer whales and great white sharks that like to eat these pinnipeds. They also need these incredible swimming powers in order to catch fish, as they also can swim extremely fast. As well as the sea lions, a bunch of fish like these guys were also swimming around with us. I was suspecting that these were zebrafish because they were striped quite a bit like a zebra. However, if I get them wrong, comment me down below. There are also a number of parrotfish eating algae off the sea floor. Parrotfish get their name from the fact that they have a hooked beak like a parrot. They mainly eat algae and will oftentimes eat it off of coral. Sometimes they will eat coral polyps, however they will usually help coral survive by keeping the algae balanced so that there isn't so much that the coral gets sick. There are also a lot of surgeonfish swimming around, as you can see from this enormous school of fish here. Sometimes the different types of fish will get mixed in with the same groups. The snorkeling soon comes to an end. We soon head back to the raft to begin making our way back to the ship for our next island. This time our ride is a bit of a short one, and we soon arrive at our next island before we know it. For our final activity in the Galapagos Islands, we were headed to a very special beach. The beach had lots and lots of sea lions hanging out in the sun on the sand. However, that's not even the best part of the beach. Just offshore were a school of young white-tipped shark pups. That's what you call a baby shark, a pup, which I find a little bit weird because they're not really related to dogs or pinnipeds. This is not a camera zoomed in the slightest. This is exactly how close I actually was to these young sharks. Usually people would say that you are crazy to get this close to sharks, but seeing as they are young sharks and not really a species known to attack humans, I was okay. There are over 400 different species of sharks in the world, and they come in all different sizes. From the 3-ton great white shark to the very small dwarf lantern shark. When a shark gives birth to her pups, it will usually just give birth in a lagoon, like this one here, and then head right back out to sea, leaving the youngsters to dwell on their own and rely on instinct for the first few years of their life. Young sharks like these white tips here will spend the early stages of their life in lagoons before eventually heading out into the open ocean to become fierce ocean predators. Despite being some of the most powerful predators in the ocean, many types of sharks have become vulnerable to endangered. People, for reasons like making shark fin soup or just killing sharks for sport, will kill an insane 100 million sharks every year. Now that puts species like the great white in grave danger, and if we keep hunting sharks, this incredible fish species may eventually disappear forever. Seeing as they're my favorite group of fish, and my favorite type of shark being the great white, I really hope that people start to take note of this sooner or later and start protecting these incredible species. Well, that about wraps up our expedition in the Galapagos Islands. I had an absolute blast on this adventure. I saw marine iguanas, Galapagos tortoises, white-tipped sharks, sea lions, frigate birds, all sorts of amazing creatures. As we arrive at the dock the next day, it's now time to bring today's video to an end. Before I go, I would just like to let everyone know that I'm not going to be uploading to the channel for the next couple weeks. The next few videos that I'm planning to post have yet to be edited, and thus I also have some other things to do, like school, that will be coming up soon. So expect the next video to be coming up sometime in about 2 weeks or so. Anyways, if you enjoy my videos, I suggest clicking a like and subscribing to the channel if you haven't. All of these likes and subscriptions will help support the channel and the content that I produce. There's a lot more exploring, visiting attractions, and flying and riding trains and planes to look forward to on this channel, so stick around so you don't miss it. Anyways, that concludes today's video. I hope you all enjoyed watching, and I will see you all next time. Take care.